So today we're going to talk about these two pedals I have off my Bluegrass 19s, and I realized it was now a 1960s vintage bike based on my research that I had. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to figure out they're definitely, both of them are very wobbly. It means there's a lot of play in here, which is obviously not good for the bearings. I need to get these re-greased. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to get this thing open, because this is not, it looks like there's a couple of flanges here that have been twisted just to keep it in place. And since I've never worked on these before, this is gonna be a bit of a challenge for me to figure out what to do. But hopefully with a little bit of effort and a little bit of ingenuity, we should be able to figure out how to get these things reconditioned, repacked, get the bearings repacked, and just basically just take a look and see if there's anything that needs to be replaced on the inside. And obviously we'll do the best we can to restore these so that we can put them back on the bike.
So the first step for me was to get those flanges straight, and I looked around, dug out some I had some needle-nosed vice grips and something with a lot of strength that would be able to close in on those things and try to straighten them out. I spent a lot of time using different things. You know, I used some channel locks. As you can see, I went with some regular pliers as well. I used, I think I tried to use some, even some diagonal cutters. Just anything that had enough force on the jaws to straighten those out without having to try to break them. You know, that's really what I was looking for. And even tried to, you see, I can try to hammer, to just hammer it off. So it, you know, I had some linesman's pliers as well. I just tried everything I could think of to try to get that thing open. And you know, I worked at it. I spent a good half an hour trying to get those things off. And I mean, they were straightening out, and what I was trying to do was be really slick and finesse them to the point where I could make them as straight as possible and just slide it right off the edge. And I wasn't being too successful. I mean, it was starting to become wobbly, meaning that I was starting to get it. It was now loosening up, but not enough to pull it off. So what I did was I kept working at it, and then I just checked new things, tried new stuff, even to the point of where I actually said, okay, well, let me try to just shave down a little bit of the excess on the edges of these tabs. Maybe that will be sufficient for me to be able to get these things off. And again, I was also creating a lot of burrs because of the way I was doing all this work. And so finally I just said, all right, I'm just going to use a screwdriver. And I just brute force just took the sucker and worked at it, and boom, lo and behold, I got it off. So I was like, fantastic, great, it's off. So I started looking at it, and here I suddenly realized that it was because of the way it was constructed. As you can see, there's a bit of a flange on the end. That's where it's like a press cup, and I can't get the ball bearings out without destroying the spindle itself. So after that, I was like, well, then I'm not going to try to disassemble this piece, the spindle, and take off that sheathing and the cups and all this stuff. I think that would be better for me to do just simply go ahead and repack the bearings, and once those bearings are repacked, then I could just go ahead and put it back together. I mean, that's the real intent. What I did not have access to was those external bearings, the ones on the outer end of the spindle. And so since I was able to see them now, I was able to get some, just force some grease in there and get them to spin nicely without having them exposed to the elements. That was my main concern. And it would have been nice had I had some more, just have something that was screwed on that could easily unscrew and screw back on, but I didn't have that option. So then I went ahead, and once I had everything all packed, I started trying banging it back on. But now, because I'd forced it off, I had to try to force it back on, and I was having difficulties with just the straight hammers. So what I did is I used the PVC pipe, and with enough so I could bang on it on both sides at the same time to try to force it down, and that's what it was. That was what I needed to do. And so once I was able to do that, then I went ahead and bent the flanges. I mean, it was not easy because I had to make sure I bent them enough so that there was no play in that bracket anymore. And that was obviously some work to get that to the point where I was happy with the way that was sitting. but it wasn't too bad. I mean, it really did. It just took some thought as I did it. So then I started in on the second pedal, and lessons learned from the first one. I went ahead and just straightened out the flanges just like I did before. You know, get those tabs as straight as possible. And but this time, because I knew that the screwdriver was the key, then I went ahead and after I made sure it was as straight as I possibly could, then I just pried it off with the flathead screwdriver. And this time I just worked off one end because I didn't have to take the whole thing off, just one side, and because it opened up the flange, and I was able to pull out the spindle and all that stuff. And I did the same thing, just repack the bearings. I mean, this was much easier. It was because I learned from my first one what I needed to do. So this one was, I mean, it was almost like a piece of cake compared to the first one. So once I got that together, then I just went ahead and put it back together, put it back on. Now I only had one end of the flange to worry about, so I just banged it on with my hammer and then bent the flanges again to get those tabs bent, and there it was, and I was done. So again, I spent a little bit of time to clean up the spindles, take off the rust. Just wanted to make sure that was clean, and I was done. The next step was for me to go ahead and put it back on the bike. So I greased up the internal thread of the crank, put on one of the pedals, just tapped it on with my mallet, just made sure it was nice and snug, and went ahead and did the same thing on the opposite side. Just went ahead and put it on with my wrench. I mean, pretty standard stuff, pretty straightforward. But all I did was just put it on there, and once I felt that it was pretty snug, I was done.
Okay, now that I've finished up the pedals, I learned something interesting about these types of pedals, and that is that, as you saw through the video, the connection between the axle, the spindle of the pedal actually has a pressed-in bushing, if you want to call it that, on the opposite side. It looks like it was just compressed with some machine, some press. Just added this other end. So because it wasn't threaded, then I couldn't take it off. And because I couldn't take it off, this is basically a sleeve here that fits between the two to kind of to maintain the offset of the two cups here. And so the only thing I could do was just shove more grease in there, and it was bone dry. There was nothing in there but the bearings themselves. But that also meant that I couldn't even inspect the bearings to see if they were okay or not. So the only thing I did was just put some more grease in there. They're spinning nicely. I don't hear any grittiness or anything like that, strangely enough. So really, actually, surprisingly enough, worked out really good. And it just had this little flange on the outside, and it just held with these two little pieces here, these metal tabs that were just bent and held this whole thing into place. So I learned on one how it worked, and I was really trying to struggle to make it perfect so that I could just slide it right out, and it didn't work out that way. So finally what I did was I just came in with a screwdriver and just by brute force just pried it out. And once it pried out, then I was able to see all the internal workings of the pedal. So the second one was a little bit easier because I just went at it I kind of straightened out the tabs a little bit, and then I just went at it with the screwdriver, and that was it. And just pulled out one side because then I understood how this whole thing worked, and was able to actually service it rather quickly and get it back together again without too much trouble. So again, spins nicely now. Still, there is play. I can still feel the play if it's still there, but I can't do anything about that. So again, just put it back together, and now it spins freely, but I don't hear the metal to metal grinding sound that I was hearing before. It's definitely not there. I can hear that it has the grease in there, so fantastic. The other pedal, same thing. Again, I don't hear any grinding of metal at this time, so it sounds like the bearings are now well greased, and so hopefully these will be able to hold out. If for some reason I were to come to the conclusion that these pedals just simply were I just could not recover them, that they were just too far gone, I would just simply replace them with other pedals. The problem though is, again, as I'm doing restoration projects, I like to maintain these, actually the original components, so that they fit with the overall view of the bike, as well as as you see down here. This is actually my next project, a piece of this project, which is the rear wheel. And this actually, just a little bit of a teaser here, but this is the 3-speed. The internal hub in here has the 3 speeds. And I've already noticed that, if I can spot it here is a broken spoke. So definitely going to take some a breakdown and rebuild of the wheel in order for this to look good as well. And there's significant rusting on the rim as well. I have, before I started doing my channel, I actually do have around here somewhere, if I can find it, so this is the front wheel here, and I've already taken it apart. I have the tube on here just so I keep track of which tube goes with this wheel. But it actually has already been, I've already cleaned it up, and I already took care of the hub as well, so the hub is pretty clean. Strangely enough, on the front wheel, it does not have a lock ring. So if I were just to twist these actually would come apart, and it would become loose. So I'm a little surprised that maybe this was before they realized that they need to have lock nuts on here to be able to maintain these as closed. Otherwise, maybe they assumed that because when you put it on the bike, then the other nut that goes on the outside of the fork that holds it onto the fork would then become the lock nut as well for the internal mechanism of the actual wheel itself, the hub. So again, this is just, I mean, there's things I'm learning about this bike. I can see, obviously, there's definitely been some regression. Well, obviously, when this bike was built, again, there was definitely some engineering limitations, if you want to say it that way, in some of the things they did. And no doubt, with time, of course, they learned about these things. They said, you know what, I think we can improve on the way of the design, and let's instead go to this thing, or let's add this thing here to improve the functionality and the serviceability and the longevity of the bike itself. So again, that's really where I'm at right now. Like I say, the next project will probably be the rear wheel. But for now, I've got my crank is good now, good. It spins really smoothly. I have another video about this. I'll probably put this in the link. So I already did the crank, and the crank, you can see I'm finger spinning it with no troubles whatsoever. Now I'm happy with the pedals, because the pedals now move also according to what I would expect to see. And now I'm moving on to other stuff. So until the next video, thanks a lot, appreciate it, and subscribe. And if you want to get more notifications, obviously hit the notification bell and all that good stuff. But really, what it is, just leave a comment and tell me what you think about the way these are turning out, and the way eventually when I finish up this bike completely, then how the finished product will turn out. Thanks a lot.